On this episode of the Construction Lending Podcast, we sat down with Dr. Eric Johnson, Assistant City Manager of Austin, Texas, to talk about rapid urban growth, affordability, and how Austin's using AI to revolutionize the permitting process. Dr. Johnson shares insights on balancing booming demand with housing affordability, speeding up development by embracing technology, and how AI is helping both city officials and builders get projects off the ground faster than ever.
85% of site plans coming into city to be reviewed are incomplete plans. So we're like, oh my goodness, we got to figure this out. So the AI tool is upfront course correcting for all of the inefficiencies in these plans. Our new weapon is speed. If we can get you through faster, we know we can save you roughly $8 million a month or so in terms of cost on that project. So we can cut this thing down 90 days, 120 days. That is enormous savings for that project.
I'm Sean Ferris, CEO of Land Grill and host of the Construction Lending Podcast. We have a great guest today. We have Dr. Eric Johnson, the city assistant city manager, big mouthful of words right there, the city's assistant city manager of Austin, Texas. And I cannot say, Dr. Johnson, like how excited I am to have this conversation. I got a lot of curiosity about what's going on in Austin, Texas and what that journey's been like. But welcome to the podcast.
All right. Thank you very much.
So let's just dive in. Austin, Texas is probably, to me, never been it's one of those cities that's like, how have I never been to Austin, Texas? And I hear so much about just mass migration and your growth and how do you manage this? Going from like a small, known city to like this big, rapid growing city and lots of tech people moving in there and all sorts of exciting things. What's going on in Austin, Texas?
Well, let me start out by saying this, a bunch of different things. Let me just say that it's a phenomenal city anchored by what we call a full stack economy, which is a combination of government, university, tech, and this creative sort of culture here. And when you look at the sort of combination of that formula from the venture capital production to the number of patents that come out of this town and the ongoing influx, in particular, of younger people coming into the city, it really sets up Austin as a true sort of dynamic city built for the 21st century. So what that means is, we took off. A lot of growth in the early sort of phases of the growth. We're starting to stabilize where you've got a little bit more growth taking place in the suburbs. So Austin has cooled off a little bit, but we call it a sort of reset moment because we believe somewhere around 28, 29, it's going to be on another sort of rocket ship takeoff position. So yeah, it's a great city.
That's really interesting. I grew up early on in Phoenix. And then moved to California. So I had this like really interesting perspective, different growth strategies. Whereas, you get into like Southern California, Northern California, San Francisco and LA, that it's landlocked in. You're not building much. You're doing a lot of stuff within the boundaries that are there. But like in Phoenix, it just got to grow out and create its own infrastructure kind of as it grew. And I'm kind of thinking, maybe you guys are a little bit of a blend between the two. Like, how's that kind of?
Yeah. We are a blend of the two. We're emphasizing greater density, a lot of verticality in Austin, and you can see it in terms of the accelerated growth of the skyline. So we have sort of the combination of both going on in Austin. So, and I think part of it is by design. It's a way to manage growth. We do it in such a way where we also try to pick up what we call community benefits along the way to make sure we're taking care of elements of the community.
Oh, that's great. Well, what would you say, kind of been like the bigger challenges? I always hear that, it's just a destination hotspot for people from California. And, we met with the American Bankers Association. It was an amazing roundtable from, all sorts of almost every state. And they were all kind of talking about, how migration from California has impacted them with property values escalating and, they're coming in and buying, driving up housing prices over that. But, I think you guys dealt with that really early on and figured out
Yeah,
a
right.
plan on how to manage that. What's that been like?
Yeah, it's been like well, first of all, lots of individuals from California, but they are also coming from other places as well, right? So in the early sort of years of this boom, going from, a mid-sized city to a larger sized city, it's been what I would call fast pace. You'll see things like the affordability issues really starting to creep up in terms of housing costs, because even those coming from California, you sell and bring that equity with you to Austin, you're going to pick up a home 800,000 or 500,000 versus 800,000 in California, and then it starts to raise the prices of homes across the city in general. So, yep, some of that has happened. So the question has been, how fast can Austin move to sort of counter for some of those things taking place, trying to remain affordable, giving the external sort of migration and people coming in while trying to maintain the city and make sure it's affordable. That's been the big challenge.
Yeah. How do you balance demand and affordability? And that, there's no full disclosure. I'm from California. We don't balance demand and affordability. It's, we kind of live in this upside down land out here, which is so counterproductive and has its own issues. But how have you guys been able to do it?
Yeah, under our density bonus programs, in particular around affordable housing, we try to get, as part of what we call community benefits for every development, some affordability, right? That and the ongoing continuation of housing bonds to do more affordability to the greatest extent possible. Now, the interesting thing about it is, because the median income here is so high, even at a 30%, 50%, 60% of every median income, that is still pretty significant income in Austin, Texas. So Austin has done a good job in terms of building affordability around the 60%. Now we're trying to get more at the 50% and below, because we know that's where the greatest need lies. So whether it's through the city council, the advocates, and the development community, I think it's been sort of this move to try and do as much as we can, to be honest with you. So part of the main conversation constantly in this town is about affordability in terms of just regular individuals trying to work and be able to, survive. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
Is it tough to balance, and I'm coming in with these kind of preconceived ideas, and I imagine this city, people that have lived there for a long time, and it's a tough thing. It's like, hey, I've got, this house that we've always lived in, and God, it looks really enticing to let it go and make a bunch of money. But then where do they go? Right.
Yeah.
Do they go to a lower cost city? Like, do they try to stay and just downgrade, or what do you?
Yeah. You're describing a serious issue, because, okay, property values escalated. Like, oh, what do I do now? Even if I wanted to sell this house, it's going to be difficult for me to go find something that is affordable to me. So I think what you see is, well, I'm just going to downsize, and maybe I'll move to another location. Maybe I move outside the city. Maybe I go to the suburbs or something like that, because it's going to be difficult for me to find something in my price range, given I've had this home for the last 20 years. And now I know I'm not going to be able to find a house at a price point. So I think it's a combination of moving further out to the suburbs. I'm going to go out there and buy, or I may say, okay, well, I'm going to take my nest egg and put it in a bank, and I'm going to live in an apartment. It's something along those lines in terms of what's happening.
That's got to be a real emotional decision for a lot of those people. And
yeah, because you would have bought that home in particular in a location where all of a sudden more growth is happening, and you realize I can't maintain the property taxes on this thing, so I have to do something. Some people will lose their homes, and some will figure out a way to, maybe again go to the surrounding suburbs or something that may be cheaper.
Yeah, for those that aren't, in California, we have a proposition that protects our property taxes from escalating, and it's different in all parts of the US, but for those that are listening that don't understand how property taxes work in Texas, how would somebody be affected that's, hey, we're multi-generation here, but this, crazy real estate increases, how does it affect them? They've been living there for a long time. Like, does it just go up every year and they got to figure out a way to keep up? Or
Yeah, they have to figure out a way to keep up, but the state is imposing on, let's say, municipal governments, for example, a property tax cap. So we no longer have free reign, to increase the property taxes. We're capped now at 3.5% is all we can do. So, but there's a lot of appeals in the value process that a lot of people are going through. So it's kind of like in the early stages, I would say, to try and figure out a way to control for some of that. But anything short of that, you're kind of like on your own.
Yeah, that's really industry. Kind of pivoting the conversation towards kind of growth and how you guys have managed this growth. We talk a lot about on the podcast about regulation and impact. It seems to always come up. How is, what's Austin's kind of position been about, managing that growth and, hey, we need more homes, but, how do we manage regulation? Where would you guys say you are from a regulatory perspective, across the nation? You kind of have a gauge of, hey, these guys have a lot of regulations here in California. It's really hard to get things done. Where would you guys classify Austin as being on that spectrum?
Yeah, so we are evolving in that process because Austin has, I would say, done a good job what's called under decoupled growth, where you're trying to make sure environmental standards and things of that nature, even all that stuff is a part of the entire development process, right? So Austin has been sort of more focused over the years to make sure that growth was controlled in such a way that it did not provide this overrun of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So where we are today, because the suburbs are creeping up on Austin, outpacing us in terms of growth, we're moving in a different direction where we are working to remove as many regulatory barriers as we can. How do we look at speeding up the development process? How do we look at making sure we're mitigating and creating community benefits without slowing down development in the city? Because as things go, growth has slowed, which means we're going to have to focus in on growing our tax base, which is something different than what Austin has had to face with in the past in terms of moving the city forward.
That's interesting. So it's, when I heard you talking there, I kept thinking of oh, hey, there's kind of like these levers, to manage growth that you can kind of put on. Like, hey, we've got this one over here. Let's not quite let the floodgates open, or hey, we need to ease over here. Are there levers you don't want to pull and levers you do want to pull, or does that kind of just always change?
Well, the levers we want to pull is to make the development process using a message saying we're open for business, but not hard to do business with.
Yeah.
So emphasizing speed, but knowing you're not going to have to go through this gauntlet of regulatory challenges that will make you say, no, I don't want to invest in Austin, right? So the levers we're trying to pull is, one, making sure that we are open for business, to ensure, because on the resource front, with the state capping property taxes at 3.5%, is causing some fiscal challenges. So now, in the past, Austin, its growth boom was just happening. People, wow, they're coming, right? They're still coming, but now we've got a different environment where we have to think about growing the tax base. And instead of being, we're just growing with Austin, they're going to come. Now it's like, we need to grow intentionally because we got to make sure the fiscal position of the city remains strong.
Ooh, that's kind of a tough balance where, hey, that money, constantly having that flow of money coming in consistently is it sounds like it's somewhat unknown, right? How do you take the variable out of that that question. So it's like you get more of a, hey, it's more predictable, right? Is that where you're trying to get to, is like more like a more predictable tax base, or am I thinking about that?
Right. We're trying to, so we live in an environment where federal dollars are cut. You got limited dollars from the state. Now you've got additional property tax capping and things of that nature. All the COVID money is gone away, all of that stuff. So now it's like, okay, what do we need to do to make sure we can fund the things we want to fund in Austin? Because Austin is about community. So in order to do that, we're looking at how do we grow development value by a certain percentage every year to contribute to our general fund. And the beauty of that is Austin is not off the radar for anybody. I mean, the conversations we have with big companies and that want to be here, the question for us is going to be, can we move fast enough and be open in the process to convey that, we want the investment here. So yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with right now.
No, that makes sense. Now, we briefly got to bring up this conversation about AI, and it seems like I get to talk about AI all day long. And every time you use it, you're just kind of amazed with, wow, I can do that now. That was different than yesterday. And how hearing you talk about like, hey, we're open for business, but we're also trying to be efficient and and smart about how we do that. How has AI made an impact for you guys in Austin?
Yeah, that's a great question. We, as part of a 36-month economic development roadmap we introduced about 2 months ago, we also launched a pilot AI tool with a new startup tech company in Austin. And what it's doing is we realized that 85% of site plans coming into the city to be reviewed are incomplete plans. So we're like, oh my goodness, we got to figure this out. So the AI tool is upfront course correcting for all of the inefficiencies in these plans. So we've got some of the big engineering firms partnering with us on this. And what we are now learning through this process is not only speed, but the ability to go back over a 10-year period and review comments from city reviewers on specific product types and be able to provide the technical answers to that engineer who will then course correct and submit. That is what we're learning. So we are actually a memo is going out later this week, kind of highlighting where we are. We believe we're going to have some very powerful results heading into the fall. And that's important because if we're saying we're open for business and a big user says to us, well, Dr. Johnson, we need speed to get through the process. I'm like, hey, cool. We can run you through our AI tool. And guess what, guys? Boom, we're ready to go. So that's kind of where we are with it. And we think we're going to have some really good results coming from it.
No, that's a huge, huge deal. And, we've talked a lot about, how do you get more predictive when somebody comes in with a set of plans? Like, how can you almost pre-permit something, right? And it sounds like this is kind of the intersection where those kind of ideas of pre-permitting meet expedited, like an expedited permitting process, because all the information's there and the carrying costs. When you get into some of these larger projects, it's huge. The daily interest cost just to carry something while you go through a 12-month or 2-year review process.
Yeah.
Be crazy.
You know what? That is absolutely right. And that is what we're banking on. What we're saying is our new weapon is speed. If we can get you through faster, example, on a, $600 million project using traditional industry financing standards, we now know with a 24-month build-out period, we know we can save you roughly $8 million a month or so in terms of cost on that project. So we can cut this thing down 90 days, 120 days. That is enormous savings for that project, right? So that is kind of how we're looking at it. And we've got some early results on that as well. So, but to your point, the way you described it, that's how we're trying to frame it.
No, I think that's that's huge. And I think the benefit as you get there is definitely makes that sign out front say, hey, open for business a little bit brighter, right?
That's absolutely right.
I mean,
Yep. But the only thing I request from the big users and people that we get through, I ask them to write us a great letter and talk about the experience you had coming through the city.
you guys
So,
sound like a software company. It's
yep, that's right.
I mean, and there's a lot of similarities in that. We've been really putting a lot of effort into AI, and from our perspective, our product looks at it in a different lens, more for the collateral and the financing, but helping construction lenders get quick feedback if a project is missing anything. Do these plans and specs and contract and budget and all these agreements, do they, the appraisal, do they all work together? What are the big red flags? How can we resolve those things faster? So it's very, very similar.
Yep.
In compressing that time, reducing the risk, bringing value quickly. Because I think, if you've ever been on the other end of that permit line trying to get a house built or a project, off the ground, I mean, that's a big, huge cost. The budget's in there. And I think it's really frustrating from the, let's call it the customer perspective, when you're going back and forth, and I'm sure you have all sorts of review committees depending on where the location is, cultural review or historical review, depending on the zone, right?
Yep.
But and those are special. But when it comes to like, hey man, I just want to build my family home, my forever home down the street here, there's got to be a faster way to be helpful and get you guys what you need, get them the permits that they want, and help reduce and compress that time. I mean, it's one of the biggest fears that construction lenders have is like, hey, we've got this proposed project that we're going to finance, but how long is it going to take to get permits? And this kind of, we make a lot of assumptions, our AI does some predictive analysis based on the information that it has. But, where the rubber meets the road is, well, are these going to get approved? Are they going to go back and forth for 6 months? And in California, it's 6 months. It's a year. It's, hey, you get something, you go, you wait in line, they make an appointment for you. You show up, they go, hey, it's going to be 3 months till our review team gets back to you. And then it's going to be another 3 months till you get your formal hearing. Then after that, you got to go resolve these things. And it's another 3 months. And, fingers crossed that you get it right, and I think that's a huge frustrating thing. So I think what you guys are doing is very, very commendable.
Yeah, it's a frustrating piece, but what we do is we actually work very closely with the building community, and we meet probably at least once a month. And what we do is we go through and identify items we can sort of course correct for. So even with the AI, we look at things, for example, changes in the application process. Sometimes applications have been changed and you don't even know what's added to it. So now you got more time because you submitted an application that was the old version. Or doing things like administrative rulemaking where you're doing it on the fly versus doing it once a year with advance notice. So we've been trying to work closely with the building community to both identify and course correct for some of those issues, while also working on things like AI and codes and all of that stuff.
No, this is awesome. And I think we could probably talk about AI all day long. But I got kind of like just a random question is, what drove you? And you may not even know this question, but what drove you to say, hey, this is a problem. We need to get it fixed. There's clear benefits here. AI can solve it. Like, why go down that path to begin with?
You know why? Because we also had the realization the product we were starting, we've been getting into the system. What happens is, because sometimes the rules of the game is so convoluted, engineering firms would just submit because we're going to rely on the city to tell us, and they're going to give us all these comments back because we don't have confidence in the system. So submit it and they'll write up something and let us know. So when we started to become aware of the percentage of what we call bad plans coming into the city, I was like, oh my goodness, we got to course correct for this. What if we had a 90% completed plan coming through the process and there's only 10% left to review? So that realization and the realization that we're going to have to communicate that we are open for business, given some of the changes we're seeing in slowing growth, fiscal challenges, and the ability to grow the tax base, all started to come together at the same time. And that's been sort of the basis of it. And we've been not slowly, but sort of strategically chopping away at things to make it easier to do. So the AI tool in particular, when we got the call, and the call came from a pro bono startup tech company in Austin, so we didn't have to pay for it. It's like, hey, Dr. Johnson, we got this new startup company. It's former individuals from some of the tech companies here who knew about the development process. They knew about the challenges, and they created this new AI tool. We want to partner with you guys to test it. I'm like, yes. And that's how we got started.
That is. Now, if you flash forward, let's get, and things with AI are happening so fast. You flash forward 3 years. Well, I was going to say 5, let's say 3 years. What do you see that process looking like? If everything goes well, like what does it look like to you?
What I see, if we go forward 3 years from now, I see it as a companion sitting next to a site reviewer, right? It's not in competition. It's like, it's like Batman and Robin. Batman has Robin, right? So Robin is the AI to Batman, right? So it's like, if you look 3 years from now, I would see that this is embedded in our system, and the system is, significantly more efficient. Our resources are spent at a better sort of clip. I think we'll see a better relationship with the development community. It's a combination of all of those, right? In terms of what I see happening.
It's really interesting. We spend a whole lot of time trying to, check our formulas and gut check ourselves on, where's everything going here? Are we doing the right thing? Are we preparing everybody from the future? And, we spend a lot of time summing up that, AI is like getting this superhuman power.
That's absolutely right. Yep. But, there's some fear amongst those who work in the business. Mm-hmm. And what we try to say to them is, you have to look at this as a sidekick, because you're still going to do the sort of closing part of the reviews. So instead of getting plans at 30%, you're going to be getting plans at 90, 95% complete. And all you have is 5, maybe 10% left to review. And that is going to be a huge way to help support the work that you do. So there's a lot of fear, but if you look at it from that perspective, it's not as sort of horrific as you may think it is.
No, I thoroughly agree. That conversation, is such an important conversation to have. And it does sound like, hey, there is that fear, and you guys are dealing with that conversation, up front. And I think a lot of companies, especially, they want to put off that conversation, or they don't want to have that conversation. But I think at the end of the day, getting ahead of it and being upfront and helping develop that skill set, I think, is immensely important, because.
Well, let me say this too. Let me say this too. In using this AI tool, every department that has a role in the review process has met one-on-one with the startup company that's leading this tool. And what's amazing about it is the responses are, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I can see how this is going to work. So in Austin's process, you've got parks, watershed, Austin Energy, water, fire. You got all these different departments that has to sort of weigh in on the development process. And we've gone, through all of them. And we are now actively awaiting a big site plan to come in that really should put this thing to a test and really show what it can do.
No, it sounds like you guys are on the right path. It's hopefully everybody can embrace this, because it helps bring up their value as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
they hop, skip, and a jump over to, a different city, and they have this skill set, and their output could be 10 times more than, the person sitting next to them, because they know how to use AI and efficiently use AI. I think that's we've kind of come to this conclusion, that it's a very upfront conversation. When we look to the future, and you're going to have those that are early adopters, heavy users, and those that like, hey, I don't want to, I don't want to go there. And when you start comparing them, it's will there be people that lose their jobs? Probably the ones that resist using AI. If you don't have that superpower, it's going to be hard to,
it's going to be hard. That's right.
Jenny's doing 10X and you're doing 10% of what Jenny's doing. Man, you're making it really tough. Come on, let's.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is absolutely right. Yep, that is right.
Our CTO made a comment this morning just about like the entire expectations are changing. And, I think that's a really interesting thing to conversate, but I'm so glad you guys are on the forefront of it, and so excited for you guys and what you're going to be able to produce there. Is there anything else that you're excited about what you guys are working on in Austin?
Well, we're working on so much. I just have to tell you the number of hotels descending on this town, because when I mention a full stack economy, it's just not about tech here, because given this is a capital town, because you got the entire state of Texas government here. Then you've got the juggernaut and University of Texas here. So from like University of Texas just announced yesterday the new MD Anderson Cancer Center here, which is going to be heavily AI-based medical testing and learning.
Wow.
It's those types of things. We're seeing a pickup in defense industry types of things, right? While at the same time seeing more around creative industries, doing more in Austin. So while we may be in a sort of different growth pattern, I believe what we're excited about is navigating what we think is going to be a challenging 3 years, given what we're dealing with. But our pipeline of development projects are building pretty fast, and we expect that explosion somewhere around the end of 28. New convention center, new airport terminals. We're adding another 32 gates. So the airport is basically going to be redone, brand new convention center, anchored by tons of residential coming. One thing we're mindful of is trying to make sure we can keep downtown stabilized with some of the vacancies downtown. We're trying to figure out a strategy around that. So I think the future is bright for Austin, to be honest with you, in terms of what we see is we're in a reset moment, and according to what we're looking at in terms of some data from the Federal Reserve, we believe somewhere around end of 28, early 29, that pipeline would have gotten to a point where it's all going to start to take off, and construction here is basically going to be off the charts. That is what we're banking on. That's why we're pushing to say we're open for business. That's why we're trying, looking at tools like AI, working closely with the city council and things of that nature to make sure we can ride this next wave and be ready for what we think is going to be another boom in Austin, Texas.
Oh, that's really exciting. No, that's really, really exciting. Well, Dr. Johnson, it's really great having you on the podcast here. Is there anything else, before we get to our last little segment here, which I get really excited about, anything else you want anybody to know about what's going on in Austin and how you guys manage this crazy growth?
No, it's a maturing city. Mm-hmm. The city's still trying to figure out from a maturity perspective what it is and what it will be. And I just think that it's going to be one of those situations where we're riding a tough wave, but at the end of the day, we're going to be saying we're open for business and come join us. If you're looking for a place to invest, this will be the place to do so.
Let me ask this question that I should have asked really early on. When we say Austin has grown, what numbers stand out in your head of like, oh yeah, I got one for you. Like, this is how much we've grown in the last 10 years or 15 years. Like, how much growth are we really talking about?
Oh my goodness. You're talking about a town that was in the 80s, early 90s, late 80s, whatever, 250,000 to one right at a million, slightly over a million people right now.
Whoa.
You see, that's the type of growth.
Yep. Is it
And
year over year, like double digit, but it's like steady 5, 10, like, are you guys exceeding 10% a year?
it was hovering well above those numbers up until a couple of years ago. It started to slow down. So now, believe it or not, we've dropped to probably somewhere around 3,
Hmm.
right? Somewhere around 3. That's why we call it a reset, right? So now
You're
it's
catching your breath.
next.
We call it catching your breath.
Yep, because we're catching the breath, right? And what we believe is coming on the other side. That's why I mentioned I think you're going to start to see around end of 28 going into 29 because these things are going to be coming on. The whole new light rail system underway, the redevelopment of Interstate 35. I mean, it is nothing but just all of that stuff is going to be happening all at one time.
Oh, that's great. That's great. All right, last segment. If you could snap your fingers and get rid of one regulation out there, federal, state, city regulation, whatever it is, but it's got to be related to housing, which one would you get rid of?
You know what? If it was related to housing, it would be.
Uh-oh, you thought of one.
Yeah, actually, it would have to be the permitting process, to be honest with you. If I
Just
can
get
just
rid of the
say,
permitting process.
yeah, hey, just go build it. It would have to be something like that, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
That's what I would say.
You are from Texas, and Texas is known for that. It's like, hey, yeah, if you want to go build something over there, go build it.
Yeah, because the more you can get on the ground, things of that nature, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a whole podcast wrapped up in that.
Yeah, that's a whole dissertation.
Have you ever built or renovated your own home?
Yes, I have.
What was that like?
Tough because of the cost of the materials. This is through a renovation of a home in New Orleans. Tough because of the renovation costs. Tough because of the time for inspections, right? Tough for the permitting, just you have one permit reviewer, you change, that person's changing, how they view things. And it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had, because there was no certainty in the process. I think that's why I'm so passionate about this stuff now, because that was a really bad experience. And the weather and, getting through all of that, trying to get utilities connected, that whole process was really, really disappointing.
I almost don't want to ask, would you do it again?
Yeah, I would do it again. But I would do it again in a different location where the process is better.
AI up and running in Austin.
Yeah.
You're going there.
If they're using AI and all that stuff, I'm saying, yep, I can come build there. That's what I would say.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, if people listen to the podcast, they want to get a hold of you, they want to pitch you on this new AI thing that they got, or, they want to come to Austin and open up shop, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can shoot me email at eric@austintexas.gov.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, it was great. Appreciate it.
I want to follow up with all this AI stuff and see how it's doing.
Yep. We'll touch
all
base.
Right. Well,
I appreciate it.
Much. You have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace independent professional judgment. Land Gorilla Inc. makes no representations, warranties, or promises for and disclaims any express or implied warranties related to content. Before acting on any information, you should consider the appropriateness of the information as it pertains to your unique business needs.